These are the steep Yanshan Mountains of northern China. A landscape completely different from its surroundings appears amongst the towering trees in these majestic mountains. It is a garden twice the area of the Summer Palace and 8 times the area of Beijing's Forbidden City. Here can be found stately palaces, pavilions, terraces, running water, and splendid temples. Together, they preserve the memory of the glory of the Qing Empire. Chengde is 230 kilometers away from Beijing. It's the home of the mountain resort, the largest remaining imperial garden in the world. In the year 1703, China was under the reign of Qing Emperor Kangxi. At the opposite hemisphere, the British Empire under Queen Anne built a superb palace on the bank of the Thames. In April, Tsar Peter the Great of the Russian Empire built St. Petersburg on an island at the Neva River estuary. Almost at the same time as Peter the Great established his castle, Emperor Kangxi, already in possession of the Forbidden City and the Old Summer Palace in Beijing, led troops north from his capital city. They passed the Great Wall at Gubeikou Pass and reached a beautiful area in the Yanshan Mountains. There, the emperor began to have a new palace built for himself. Perhaps it was pure coincidence that the mountain resort, Buckingham Palace and St. Petersburg, 3 royal palaces that changed the course of human history, emerged in the same year. As the empire's political and military centers, Buckingham Palace and St. Petersburg were built in major important cities. Why then was the mountain resort built so far from the capital and hidden in the high mountains? In the conference room of a Russian-style building, representatives of China's Qing government were holding a heated debate with their Russian counterparts. Each single point of progress made in the negotiations was the result of intense contention. Finally, both sides reached an agreement and signed the treaty. This was the famous Treaty of Nerchinsk. The most important thing in the treaty is that it delineated the Sino-Russian eastern boundary. The news soon reached Beijing. In the Forbidden City, Emperor Kangxi, who anxiously awaited the news, knew that even if the negotiations were successful and the demarcation of the border was settled, the Russian Empire would sooner or later harass northeast China. He was certain that the Russian Empire would be the greatest hidden threat to China's northern frontier. Where then would he establish an effective defense line? A year after the treaty was signed, Taiyuan, commander-in-chief of the army stationed at Gubeikou, submitted a memo to Emperor Kangxi saying, "The Great Wall at Gubeikou has collapsed in many places. Please make the necessary repairs." Taiyuan's memo once again reminded the emperor of an important question. If the Russian Empire occupied the northeast, would the Great Wall be able to stop their advance? This time, the emperor did not approve Tai's proposal. That was because a larger plan was brewing in his mind. A year after Taiyuan submitted his memorial, an important assembly took place in a yurt on the grasslands of Dolan Nur in Mongolia. The Khalkha were a large Mongolian tribe. Due to internal strife, however, the tribe had split up into factions, and unification was now the desire of all its members. Emperor Kangxi seized the opportunity to grant titles upon the Mongolian aristocrats, reunifying the Khalkha Mongolians and making them lieges of the Qing government. The success of this assembly made the emperor see new possibilities for the defense of the northern borders. He would thwart the Russian Empire's ambition by using the fierce Mongolian cavalry instead of relying upon the Great Wall. It would be a wonderful plan. In point of fact, the emperor had already begun enforcing this huge defense plan as early as 10 years before. Emperor Kangxi had established the Mulan Royal Hunting Ground on a lush natural pasture land on the Mongolian plateau, stationing troops there. The emperor would hunt there in the autumn of each year. His entourage included his children, ministers, personal bodyguards and soldiers. They went to the north of the Great Wall, where they were welcomed by the Mongolian kings and princes, and then they moved forward to the Mulan hunting ground together. The fact was, though, that hunting in Mulan was not merely a recreational activity. It was, in fact, an annual large-scale military exercise. The appearance of tens of thousands of soldiers and the emperor's horsemanship and archery effectively deterred Mongolian nobles from betraying the court. In addition, Kangxi adopted such tactics as conferring princely titles on the Mongolian nobles and offering economic aid, as well as various other political strategies to keep the intractable Mongolian tribes under the royal court. The united Mongolian tribes on the vast Mongolian grassland effectively comprised an impregnable defense line between the northern borders of the Qing Empire and Russia. In order to keep the northern defense line under control, the emperor decided to set up an invisible Great Wall on the hinterland of the Yanshan Mountains. It would run through the surrounding areas of Mongolia. In Ruhe, between Gubeikou and Mulan, Emperor Kangxi began construction of a palace. He not only selected its location, but planned and supervised its construction. The palace was completed 5 years later, and it became the Chengde Mountain Resort. It had an area twice the size of the Summer Palace in Beijing. The emperor personally inscribed the characters Mountain Resort on the front gate plaque. One morning in the year 1711, Emperor Kangxi passed through the gate of the royal garden with confidence and composure. Since ancient times, there had been 3 passages from the north to the central plain. One ran from the Mongolian plateau to Juyongguan Pass. The second was through the foothills at the northern Yanshan Mountains to Gubeikou Pass. And the third went along the Bohai coast to Shanhaiguan Pass. The mountain resort was built on the second route. The palace in Chengde played a far greater function than the Great Wall. It linked Inner Mongolia and Outer Mongolia to the north. To the northwest, it connected the Mongolian tribes and Xinjiang. And to the east, it linked with the northeast. And it was located at a commanding position over the central plain to its south. Kangxi's new Great Wall was this mountain resort hidden in the high mountains. Using it, he could blend his political strategies and complex military purposes from within his quiet garden in Ruhe. Art and politics could be dissolved peacefully into the verdant and foggy landscape. Although the resort had political motivations behind it, it became a model of the perfect integration of imperial palace and royal gardens. The palace area is the main building complex. Located in the south of the resort, it was a place where the emperors lived, handled administrative matters, received important people, and held ceremonies. Although it was a palace, its architectural style was different from that of the palaces in Beijing. The Forbidden City was majestic and splendid, while the resort was simple and elegant. Houses here shared the features of civil residences in northern China. Simple wooden pillars, low foundations, grey bricks, and tiles without decoration. The stark contrast shows the determination of the Qing emperors to administer their empire through hard work. To the north of the palace group is the lake area. Here, a collection of copies of the best scenic spots throughout China can be seen. The zigzagging dike was the earliest construction in the mountain resort. It is an imitation of Su Dike at Westlake in Hangzhou. To the west, it links to the Greenery Islet, which shows typical features of gardens in southern China. To the north of Zigzagging Dyke is Rui Island. Buildings here follow the plain residential style of the north. At its northern end, Rui Island connects with an islet. On the islet stands a group of buildings modelled upon the Tower of Mist and Rain in Zhejiang. The islet adopted the same name. During a rainy day, from the top of the tower one can see the water and sky merge in the mists and hills from afar, and the water nearby surrounded in a haze. Jinshan Island was an imitation of an island by the Yangtze River. Emperor Kangxi had travelled there several times, and having returned to Beijing, he ordered the building of an identical one in the mountain resort. In the northeast is a towering pagoda. It is modelled after the Six Harmonies Pagoda in Hangzhou. Besides this, the undulating palace wall winding on the hill in the northern part resembles the majestic Great Wall. To the north of the lake area is the plains area. The flat terrain here reminds people of the grasslands of northern China. The mountain area occupies 80% of the total area of the resort. A garden is a place for leisurely pastimes. Some gardens have artificial hills as decoration. Here, however, the garden is built on real mountains. The mountain resort is laid out to suggest all forces are submissive to the center. The mountains in the northwest are reminiscent of those in Tibet and Xinjiang. The 10,000 tree garden in the middle is like a mixture of the Mongolian grasslands and the forests of the northeast. The pavilions and chambers in the east display the charm of southern China. The terrain of the resort is China's entire territory in miniature. It is thus a model of a unified empire. After the resort was built, Emperor Kangxi turned 60. To mark the event, leaders of the Mongolian tribes came to express their congratulations. Taking this chance, the Mongolian nobles offered funds to build temples to mark the favor the emperor had granted them. Emperor Kangxi approved the request. Puren Temple was built on the eastern bank of the Wulie River outside the resort. This was the first temple built beyond the mountain resort. It was the beginning of the large-scale construction of the outlying temples. After Emperor Qianlong ascended the throne in the year 1736, he carried out a large-scale expansion of the resort. Lion Grove Garden to the east of the palace was built during Qianlong's reign after his tour in Suzhou of southern China. The artificial mountains and ravines in the resort reflect the garden styles the emperor saw on his excursions. Emperor Qianlong sent people to inspect the Tianyi Library Pavilion in Zhejiang. He then had a library pavilion just like it built in the resort. A Mongolian yurt was built in the 10,000 tree garden, and in this yurt, Emperor Qianlong entertained Mongolian aristocrats. Of the 36 scenic spots expanded during Qianlong's reign, the Gate of Beauty and Righteousness is the most magnificent. Its name plaque is inscribed in 5 languages: Manchu, Tibetan, Han, Uyghur, and Mongolian. Plaques inscribed in 5 languages were rare at that time. This multilingual inscription implies that the Manchu-ruled Qing Empire was a unified, multi-ethnic country. In the year 1755, the Mongolian Junga tribe became embroiled in a fierce fight over the throne. The Qing government sent troops to quell the unrest and defeated the forces. They then fled to Russia after the rebellion. The government achieved a complete victory. After quelling the insurgency, in October, the emperor ordered the building of the Temple of Universal Peace, to be built in the style of the Samye Monastery in Tibet. This was to show his respect for the customs of the Mongolian people. A major feature of the temple is its combination of Han and Tibetan architectural styles. It has Han-style halls and roofs and Tibetan-style pagodas and Lama towers. This temple facilitated ethnic minorities holding religious activities. Mahayana Pavilion is the main hall of the Temple of Universal Peace. Here, a wooden statue of the Goddess of Mercy with 1,000 eyes and 1,000 arms is enshrined. It's often referred to as the Big Buddha. The Big Buddha is 22 meters high, 15 meters in circumference, and weighs 110 tons. The main body is made of trunks surrounded by wooden layers with adornments. They're covered with gold foil and painted with colors. This is, in fact, the largest and heaviest wooden statue of the Buddha in the world. In the year 1760, Emperor Qianlong was 60 years old. At the time, the Qing Emperor entered its heyday, noted for its strong national strength and national unity. Qianlong decided to have a grand birthday celebration, and he decreed that the temple of the Potaraka doctrine be built. Among the outlying temples, this temple is the largest and most magnificent. It was modelled after the Potala Palace in Lhasa, but as it is smaller in size, it goes by the name Little Potala Palace. Emperor Qianlong intended to strengthen control over border areas, especially his rule of Tibet. In the year 1778, the 6th Panchen Lama, the political and religious leader of Tibet, heard that Emperor Qianlong would hold his 70th birthday celebrations. He prepared himself to make a greeting to the emperor in the imperial court. He enjoyed high status amongst ethnic minorities. To handle this great event in which one man's audience with the emperor would win over all the people, Qianlong decided that to win over the Mongolian and Tibetan peoples and consolidate his frontier defences, he would build a palace for the Panchen Lama. The palace was modelled after Tasha Lungpo Temple in Shigaze, Tibet, and it was named Temple of Happiness and Longevity. The Panchen Lama departed from Shigaze in June of 1779, followed by more than 100 eminent monks and escorted by more than 2,000 other monks and laity. He travelled for several months before finally arriving at the mountain resort. His arrival was of extraordinary significance in promoting the unity of the empire. During the reign of Emperor Qianlong, altogether 7 temples were built around the mountain resort. They are in Han, Tibetan and Han-Tibetan architectural styles, exhibiting Emperor Qianlong's multicultural sensitivities. Built near the mountain resort, like a myriad of stars surrounding the moon, they make up the most grandiose complex of temples in China. Most of the temples have roofs covered with copper and gold tiles or glazed tiles, adding splendour to the site. They are in sharp contrast with the simple and elegant palaces within the mountain resort. In 1860, the mountain resort in Rehe saw the arrival of Xianfeng, the 7th emperor of the Qing dynasty. However, he had left Beijing for the mountain resort to flee invading British and French forces. The emperor never returned to the capital. Facing the entrance of the mountain resort is the Great Hall, where emperors handled state affairs. It was in this hall that the emperors Kangxi and Qianlong received ethnic minority leaders. Behind it were the living quarters of the imperial family. The west chamber was the emperor's bedroom. In the north was the emperor's bed, and it was here that Emperor Xianfeng died. After that, Qing emperors never again came to the resort. It was completely abandoned to the north of the Great Wall and was neglected by the Qing court. The flourishing eras of the emperors Kangxi and Qianlong become part of the past, and the Qing dynasty started its decline. Gradually, the Qing dynasty collapsed, leaving behind the crystal waters and hills of the mountain resort. Over some 200 years, as the shadow of the last imperial dynasty of China, it stood in solitude in the high mountains north of the Great Wall. Its unique landscape and architecture made it a magnificent building complex in terms of Chinese history and an epitome of traditional Chinese culture.